Nothing is ever what it seems. That's the first lesson they teach you in this line of work. When I signed on, it was just to pay off some student loans and avoid a dead-end job. Little did I know I'd become part of a team that secures UFO crashes, or UAPs as the top brass likes to call them nowadays. A glossy term for the nightmares that fall from the sky. It's a modern, respectable term. A term that would make you think we're chasing after atmospheric disturbances or some misplaced meteorological event. But let's be real, we're chasing after monsters. Horrors from beyond our world, secrets buried in the sky. Secrets that would blow the lid off of every conspiratorial whisper ever breathed about Roswell or Area 51. It's secret, so secret in fact that any blowhard who claims to know what we're up to, I guarantee, doesn't. I've been doing this for 7 years. 7 years of whispered calls, encrypted messages, midnight flights to God knows where. We secure UFO crashes, clean up the mess, deal with the unfortunate souls who happen to be in the wrong place at the right time. We recover them and make sure that no one knows what happened. This brings me to our story. It started just a few weeks ago. There's a certain placidity to the quiet hum of base life that only those who have served can truly understand. This was one such night, steeped in the quiet hush of boredom and the stark fluorescent glow of the barracks. Cards lay scattered across the tables, semi-interesting TV shows murmured in the background. The unmistakable lull of an uneventful evening, punctuated only by the sudden shrill ring of the secure line. The ring of the secure line cut through the murkiness of the evening. The whole team snapped to attention, our bodies moving even before our minds fully registered the sound. Calls on the secure line meant only one thing. We had a job. Our unit consisted of 7 seasoned professionals. Our leader was Captain Reynolds, call sign Sentinel. He was a seasoned officer and a veteran of many recoveries. Sentinel was the first to his feet, answering the call. He listened, responding with short, crisp replies. "I'm the second in command, call sign Archer." Then there's Weaver, call sign Shadow. He's our team's sniper and scout. He's a marksman who could hit a pin's head from a mile away, and he has an uncanny knack for staying hidden when he needs to. Then there's Monroe, call sign Mayhem. He's our CQB specialist and breacher. Next was Rodriguez, call sign Oracle, our communications specialist. Then there's our medic, Dr. Kowalski, call sign Lifeline. And lastly, there's Banks, our demolitions expert, going by the call sign Vault. If something needs to be destroyed or defused, well, Vault's the go-to. We're a rapid response unit, an advanced security element deployed to secure and assess crash sites before the main ground team arrives. We were designed to be the swift, adaptable, covert vanguard of our operation. Our orders were to deal with a UFO that crashed in a dense forest just off a winding road that skirted a small, secluded town. We grabbed our gear and rushed to the helicopter. Oracle relayed the coordinates to the pilot, and the team was airborne within 10 minutes of getting the call. During the flight, we went over the situation. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just a standard recovery. The chopper dropped us off in a clearing in the forest, about a half a mile from the crash, and we quickly moved towards it. As we broke through the undergrowth surrounding the crash site, the scene came into focus. It was a tableau of chaos, a large metallic UFO embedded in the forest floor, flames dancing around it, casting long, grotesque shadows that rippled and distorted as the trees swayed in the wind. It was like stepping onto a stage prepared by a surreal artist, a mesh of the alien and the terrestrial. Past the crash, a short distance through the forest, was the road.
"Eyes open, people. Let's lock down this circus,"
Sentinel ordered, his eyes scanning the area like an eagle on the hunt. The words were echoed through each of our headsets. Mayhem and Vault, both cradling their weapons, took point. Their sights set on the metallic behemoth laying smoldering and ominous in the clearing. They moved in close, covering the largest exposed surface on the craft. Oracle and I moved towards the rear of the craft and started to form a perimeter, our boots crunching softly against the forest undergrowth. Sentinel and Lifeline moved left towards the nose of the craft. Shadow moved through the clearing to take up a position on the far side of the crash, covering the road. This was standard, a drill we'd run countless times. It was about to get a lot less standard. The team continued to move with practiced caution, all senses heightened. As we approached the downed UFO, the strange alien aesthetics became more evident. The material it was made of sparkled with an unknown energy. Strange glyphs that were neither quite letters nor symbols appeared faintly on its surface. A chilling sound echoed from within the UFO, a dissonant alien hum. They exchanged looks before Vault reported,
"We have noises from inside the UAP. Can't identify them. A hum and echoes. It's like something's moving in there."
The channel went quiet for a second before Sentinel replied, a hint of uncharacteristic tension in his voice.
"Copy that. We could have survivors. Stay sharp."
Mayhem moved closer to the UAP and began to work, moving a scanner along the seemingly endless surface of the UAP. He found a slight indentation, something that looked like a door.
"Got the entrance, boss,"
he said.
"All right, Archer, Oracle, form up with them. Prepare to make entry,"
Sentinel said.
"Everyone else hold the perimeter. We don't need any surprises."
We positioned ourselves, weapons trained on the potential entrance. Mayhem attached his tools to the hull and backed away.
"Breaching in 3, 2, 1.
He pressed a button and there was a series of high-pitched chirps. Then a section of the side of the UFO melted away. We moved as a unit towards the opening. As we approached, the interior of the UAP came into view, illuminated with stark, otherworldly light. Mayhem and I stepped in, weapons at the ready. Vault and Oracle moved behind us, providing cover. The ship was a labyrinth of peculiar, shifting geometry. Corridors of pulsating colors leading to dark, cold chambers. We found the first body in one such chamber. The alien figure sprawled out awkwardly. It was an unsettling sight. Humanoid, but not quite right. Bipedal with elongated limbs, its skin a translucent green that shimmered under our flashlights. Its eyes were half closed, its face contorted in an expression of anguish or fear. It was hard to tell.
"We have a body, boss,"
Oracle radioed in, his voice barely concealing the unease that we all felt.
"Green skin, long limbs, haven't seen anything like this before. It seems to have died in the crash." "Affirmative,"
responded Sentinel. We continued through the ship. As we moved deeper into the UFO, the disquieting hum grew louder, punctuated now by eerie clattering and whispers. A flash of movement caught our eyes. Mayhem and Vault moved in closer, Oracle covering their flank. I kept our six, scanning the dark corridors for potential threats. Before we could react, a towering alien entity exploded from the darkness. Vault was flung backwards by the monster barreling into him, slashing him with massive metallic claws, all the while emitting a guttural roar that echoed throughout the ship. Another creature, smaller than the first, lunged towards Mayhem, and a third, identical to the body we had found earlier, except that it was very much alive, emerged from cover brandishing a weapon. It was odd. I couldn't identify what it was. It fired, barely missing Oracle, who took cover behind a console. The shot melted a portion of the bulkhead behind us. I took up a position opposite Oracle and we returned fire, cutting down the alien before it could get another shot off. The roar of our weapons filled the ship as we pushed back, defending ourselves against the alien onslaught. The alien that had set its sights on Mayhem roared and began to charge, its elongated limbs carrying it swiftly across the metallic surface of the spacecraft. Mayhem stood his ground, raising his weapon and unloading round after round into the creature. The creature roared in pain as the shots tore through it, but the onslaught didn't slow its terrifying charge. With a crash that reverberated through the chamber, it smashed into Mayhem, the impact staggering him backwards. Mayhem pulled the trigger once more, but the alien was too quick, too close. It nimbly dodged the blast and lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air. Mayhem tried to raise his weapon in defense, but was too slow, and his shotgun was knocked out of his grasp. The creature's claws slashed deeply into his arm. Although wounded and in obvious pain, Mayhem mustered his strength and drove a powerful kick into the creature's midsection. The creature stumbled back, momentarily disoriented. A viscous fluid dripped from its claws onto the floor. The eerie oil-like substance began to mingle with drops of Mayhem's blood, already staining the metallic surface beneath them. Seizing the moment of distraction, me and Oracle opened fire, our weapons singing in harmony. The alien creature had no chance to evade this time. Our concentrated fire was relentless, tearing through it until it finally slumped onto the floor, the oil-like substance pooling around its fallen body. Through all of this, Vault had been locked in a fierce battle with the first alien, a hulking monstrosity unlike any other beast we had encountered before. Now, Vault was sprawled on the ground, seemingly lifeless. The grotesque alien's attention pivoted towards the rest of us. It was like standing in the path of an oncoming storm. The sheer enormity of the creature casting long, treacherous shadows in the metallic belly of the UAP. Mayhem, his arm slashed open by the smaller alien's claws, fumbled with his shotgun, trying to bring it to bear. Meanwhile, Oracle and I opened up with everything we had. We unloaded our guns, creating a barrage of bullets aimed directly at the alien. But the creature was as agile as it was grotesque. It launched itself forward in a serpentine motion, slithering through the onslaught of bullets, deflecting and dodging with an unnerving dexterity. The rounds that did hit it had seemingly no effect. It was a sight that made your blood run cold. The monstrous form cutting through the hail of fire, charging directly at us. Just then, Mayhem re-entered the fray, his shotgun roaring in his hands as he rejoined the fight. A desperate effort to halt the oncoming threat. Our fire appeared to yield an effect at last. The alien creature faltered, stumbling in its mad rush towards us. In a chilling display of its survival instinct, it retreated, tearing through a corridor adjacent to our impromptu battlefield. "Follow it!" I barked. Like a well-oiled machine, we moved. We followed the echoing thumps of the creature through the winding labyrinth of the alien ship. As we chased, my radio crackled to life, Sentinel's voice cutting through the static.
"Archer, status report. What's happening?"
I found myself struggling to keep pace and deliver a coherent report. The adrenaline coursing through my veins threatened to overthrow my composure.
"Sentinel, we've engaged the, alien entities. It's retreating. We're in pursuit."
We wove through the serpentine hallways of the extraterrestrial architecture, occasionally catching glimpses of the fleeing monster. Our fingers instinctively squeezed on our triggers as we took wild shots at it, each bullet whistling futilely in the darkened ship's belly. Suddenly, we rounded a bend just in time to see the alien's distorted silhouette against an opening illuminated by the flicker of flames. The creature burst through the door. We reached the door just in time to see it disappear into the dense undergrowth, swallowed whole by our unyielding forest. As we emerged into the crash site, Sentinel was firing at the alien. His mag ran dry. Shadow swung his weapon towards the forest, the report of his sniper rifle echoing in the eerie silence that had fallen. "Missed," he hissed. "Oracle, we need you to call this in. Can you bring me up to speed? Archer, get Lifeline to Vault." I led Lifeline into the ship, weaving back to where we had fought our battle and left Vault. We reached the site of the firefight and Lifeline rushed to Vault. Vault's body lay motionless amidst a heap of twisted alien metal. The eerie silence was punctuated only by the soft murmurs of Lifeline updating us on Vault's condition.
"He's in bad shape."
Lifeline's voice crackled through the radio.
"We need to evacuate him ASAP."
There was a worry in his voice that wasn't usual for the stoic medic.
"Affirmative,"
responded Sentinel. Lifeline began to work on Vault. "Can we move him?" I inquired. "Yes, just have to slow the bleeding first." Lifeline worked for a minute or two more, then said, "All right, let's move him." We picked up Vault, and between us, we carried him out of the craft. As we cleared the door, I saw Oracle and Sentinel wrapping up a call back to base. Shadow was placing a tourniquet on Mayhem's arm. We laid Vault down near where Oracle had set up his radio equipment. "We called it in. Medivac should be on its way," Sentinel said. "What's the ETA?" I asked. "Don't know yet," Sentinel replied. Lifeline had now moved to Mayhem and was bandaging his wounded arm. Shadow moved back towards his position on the perimeter. With our wounded now taken care of as best we could, we needed to plan our next move. Time was a luxury that we couldn't afford, not with an alien entity loose in the surrounding forest. "Okay, what's the plan?" I asked Sentinel. "We need to go after that thing." "I know, we'll..." Sentinel trailed off as a new challenge presented itself.
"We got company,"
Shadow murmured, his sharp eyes catching sight of something beyond the crash site. Our heads whipped around in synchrony, hands automatically reaching for our weapons. A quartet of teenagers, their youthful features twisted into a mosaic of curiosity, disbelief, and abject horror, emerged from the brush. Their eyes darted from the glowing wreckage of the alien ship to our battle-hardened faces, eyes as wide as moons. They were your typical small-town youths, a mix of baggy jeans and worn-out sneakers, plaid shirts, and disheveled hair. For them, I'm sure that it seemed like a sci-fi show had been superimposed over their mundane, everyday reality. In the flickering light of the burning UFO, they looked even younger and more fragile. The scene had silenced their laughter, replacing it with the dread of the unknown. Our shock mirrored theirs, but for vastly different reasons. Their presence was something we hadn't planned for. An incursion into our mission that could compromise everything. Normally, we would have gotten to them before they had seen anything. The events inside the UFO had distracted us, and now we had to deal with them. "Shadow, Oracle," Sentinel hissed, his voice a blade slicing through the stunned silence. "Secure the teens." "Nicely." Shadow and Oracle nodded, moving with precision towards the teenagers. "Hey kids," Oracle began, his tone a practiced calm as he approached the youngsters, his arms outstretched, hands open to show that he meant no harm. "I know that this is a lot to take in." The tallest of the boys, gangly with the last vestiges of adolescent awkwardness, squinted at him suspiciously. "Who are you guys? What is that?" He pointed at the wreckage, his voice trembled. Oracle smiled and responded, a soothing note in his tone. "We're forest rangers," he said. "And that's a weather balloon. A secret, experimental one. But we need you all to be really brave now, okay?" Shadow, with a disarming smile, picked up the baton. "Yeah, you've seen some classified stuff here, and we need your help to keep it secret. Can we trust you?" The kids exchanged wary glances, uncertainty painting their faces, but finally they nodded. Oracle began to move them away from the crash site, speaking in low, reassuring tones, herding them towards a safer area. Now, securing the teenagers was one thing. Convincing them that they had seen a weather balloon and not a UFO was a challenge for another time. For now, we could only hope for their cooperation. Oracle and Shadow moved the kids to the far side of the crash site, away from the wreck and the road. Now we found ourselves juggling an array of threats. Our wounded, the crash site, the loose alien, and a group of civilians who had seen far too much. The words high stakes don't seem to quite cover it. "Let's secure the site. Lifeline, Oracle, keep an eye on our guests," I ordered, trying to keep my tone confident. My gaze landed on Mayhem, still nursing his wound, and then on the unsuspecting teens. As I took in the scene, a heavy weight of dread settled on my chest. Sentinel motioned for me, and I headed towards him. We were far from through with this night of horrors. We discussed the situation, and finally a decision was made. Vault, ravaged by his battle with the alien, was too critically wounded to continue. His chest rising and falling in a shallow rhythm under Lifeline's careful watch. Oracle, having successfully established a rapport with the shaken teenagers, was assigned to secure both them and the site. We were going to leave the site and the witnesses guarded by a far smaller than ideal force. But the escaped alien monster was now our highest priority. The duty of tracking the alien fell to Shadow. He was our scout and an expert tracker with an uncanny ability to read the subtlest signs of movement. He led us through the forest, dissecting the minutiae of the foreign beast's escape. For a beast so large, the alien had been remarkably light-footed, barely leaving a trail. We moved through the densely packed trees, the lights of the crash site fading behind us. The world had narrowed down to the sound of our boots crunching on leaves, the rustling of wildlife disturbed by our passing, and the faint whisper of the wind. The weight of our purpose hung heavily in the air. We trudged on through the forest until we reached the edge of a field. In the distance, beneath the somber moonlight, lay a quaint farmhouse. The alien's trail seemed to lead straight towards it. We approached cautiously, every nerve attuned to the uncanny silence that blanketed the property. The barn doors creaked ominously in the wind, their echo punctuating the oppressive stillness. A sense of foreboding seemed to permeate the farm. The absence of sound felt deliberate, as though every creature understood the danger that prowled the property. Beneath the grand old oak tree that oversaw the property sat an old Chevy truck. Shadow scrambled onto the top of a large rock wall, giving him a good position to cover us as we moved through the farm. We crept forward carefully, pieing off the barn. It was clear. We moved on towards the house. As we approached, we saw the side door had been ripped from its hinges. Sentinel climbed the porch, followed by Mayhem. I moved to cover the front of the house. It was clear. Shadow came up and took my position, and I followed the others into the house. As we cleared the house, a shocking reality unraveled. We discovered the corpses of the farm's occupants. Their peaceful farm had become a nightmarish slaughterhouse. Stifling the sickening wave of horror that threatened to overwhelm us, Sentinel relayed the grim discovery back to Oracle. His voice, usually calm and controlled, trembled ever so slightly as he acknowledged the situation. After a brief pause, he notified us that command had been notified and a second rapid response team was en route. They would secure the crash site. Sentinel asked for an update on Vault's condition. After a brief silence, the radio crackled and Oracle confirmed that Vault was stable but not out of danger. Oracle also relayed that the ground team would handle cleanup at the farm. Our orders were to continue to pursue the alien, contain it, and stop it at all costs. We left the farm and its silenced life behind. The faces of the deceased inhabitants etched into our minds. Our mission was far from over and growing more difficult by the minute. Every tree, every shadow now held a sinister potential as we journeyed deeper into the darkness. A deadly game of cat and mouse with an extraterrestrial threat. The events at the farm seemed to have changed the way the alien behaved. The alien's trail was now a nightmarish scene that bled into the countryside, leaving a swath of destruction like a scar running through the peaceful facade of Mother Nature. As we moved, the muted sounds of the rural evening provided an eerie contrast to our deadly pursuit. Crickets chirped merrily, and the occasional hoot of an owl echoed through the towering trees. Yet, underneath the veneer of the ordinary, tension wrapped around our team like a constricting python. Mayhem, usually our most hardened soldier, began to change, his wound draining him. At first glance, he appeared the same, with fluid and calculated movements and a steely gaze. But as the night deepened, the light in his eyes seemed to dim. A subtle rhythm, like a well-oiled machine, faltered within him. His shoulders, usually as square and immovable as a fortress, carried a slight slouch now. It was as if an unseen but palpable weight had settled upon him. His chiseled and hardy face glistened with a thin sheen of sweat, and his once steady hands exhibited the faintest of tremors. We pressed forward, pressing past whispering leaves, our boots crunching fallen twigs underfoot. With every passing mile, silence enveloped us. It was an unspoken agreement, a tacit understanding that conversation would only dilute our focus. It was Shadow who discovered the abandoned car first, its paint job a stark contrast against the surrounding underbrush. Its doors hung open, inviting us into the horrors that had already unfolded. Another brutal tableau of terror met our gaze. The lifeless bodies of the car's former occupants lay strewn about. Sentinel radioed Oracle.
Situation Tango. Civilian casualties.
He paused.
Request for cleanup.
Oracle's response came back uncharacteristically flat.
Understood. Ground team has been notified. They are en route. Orders are to secure the scene as best you can, then proceed. Neutralizing the crash survivor is your highest priority. Understood,
responded Sentinel. With solemn care, we moved the bodies from the blood-stained seats of the car, concealing them in the underbrush by the side of the road. Shadow hung a towel from the car's window, a feeble attempt to deceive any passing observer into thinking that the vehicle was temporarily abandoned. We continued our pursuit. The quiet that had hung over us before, now even heavier. Suddenly, Oracle's voice sliced through the silence.
Sentinel, something's off with Vault. His vitals are... they're all over the place. ETA on evac.
Sentinel asked.
We have backup inbound. ETA is half an hour. Ground teams are about an hour out.
Oracle relayed, his voice unwavering despite the concerning update.
Orders are to keep on mission. Secure and eliminate the threat. All right, keep us informed about Vault's status.
Sentinel replied.
Roger.
We continued our pursuit of the alien monster. We pushed down the road, following the alien's trail. As we rounded a bend, we could see the lights of the town in the distance. The alien was heading towards civilization, putting unsuspecting lives at risk. We had to stop it. We would stop it. This was no longer just a recovery mission. The scenes at the farm and the car had proved that. It had turned into a desperate race against time. As we drew closer to the edge of town, a building stood out. A solitary gas station stood at a crossroad about 400 yards from the edge of town. Its desolate facade was illuminated by the weak glow of a buzzing neon sign that flickered erratically, casting an eerie pallor over the scene. As we approached, we spread out, our senses on high alert. The gas station appeared vacant. A sense of unease wrapped around us like a shroud. An abandoned long-haul truck was parked askew, its driver's side door hanging open. A family car stood abandoned by the pumps, its color faded under the harsh glare of the overhead lights. Gas poured from a nozzle that lay on the ground beside it. My gaze roamed over the scene, my finger twitching on the trigger guard. Something wasn't right. The drivers were missing, but there was no sign of a skirmish other than the open doors and the lack of people and the gas pooling on the ground. There was no evidence of a fight. It was as if they had simply vanished into the ether. While this was better than what we had found at the farm or at the car, it still was unsettling. Meanwhile, Mayhem was acting stranger by the minute. His injury seemed to really be affecting him. His usually stoic expression was marred by a slight grimace. His movements were slower, burdened. He seemed extremely jumpy, which was completely unlike him. As I studied him, I couldn't help but notice a blackness seemed to be spreading under the skin around the edges of his hastily applied bandage. "Mayhem," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay, man?" He turned towards me, his face shrouded in shadows. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something I had never seen in him before. Pain or fear. He grunted, a non-committal sound that did nothing to alleviate my concern. "I'm fine, Archer," he said, his voice gruff. His curt response did little to assuage my growing worries. I watched him for a moment longer before turning back to the task at hand. As we got closer to the station, I spotted a sheriff's car parked on the other side of the station. Its lights were on and its engine was running, its doors wide open. A chilling sense of dread washed over me. A burst of static came over the radio. It was Oracle, his voice shaky.
"Vault just attacked us,"
he gasped.
He transformed. It was sudden, into some sort of monster. I don't know what. Lifeline is down. The witnesses ran off into the forest."
His voice trailed off into heavy breathing. My heart froze in my chest.
"Please repeat. Is the situation under control? What is the situation?"
Sentinel responded, his voice tense. The radio squawked, and there was a moment of static. Then Oracle's voice returned, weak and strained.
"We took him down, Sentinel," he said. "Vault is down. Lifeline is in bad shape. I think he's stable. I'm injured too. Not as bad though. I'll be okay. Need backup. Site is not secure. The kids are gone."
Sentinel replied, but my brain struggled to catch up with the words. Before I could make sense of it all, a piercing scream cut through the air. The sound came from inside the station. It was followed by the sound of gunfire echoing through the night. We moved instinctively, abandoning our cover to rush towards the sounds. A quick glance through the station's glass doors showed a deputy sheriff inside, firing at something just out of view. There was a blur, and we saw the deputy be flung backwards, a terrifying scream cutting through the air, then silence. Then something else, another scream from the back of the station. My heart pounded in my chest as we kicked open the station door and entered, rifles raised. Inside, the station was a bloodbath. The driver from the truck lay sprawled out by the counter, blood seeping from his open wounds. The deputy sheriff was crumpled on the ground, still and lifeless. A woman lay dead near the bathrooms, a look of horror frozen on her face. In the back, we caught sight of the beast. It was looming over the station's clerk, alien eyes gleaming with malice. The fluorescent lights of the station flickered ominously, casting long, monstrous shadows that seemed to dance with the hulking figure before us. The creature was massive, a grotesque amalgamation of alien anatomy, a physical embodiment of nightmares made real. Its skin, slick and shiny, reflected a sickly sheen under the artificial light. An oily substance dripped from its massive claws, reminiscent of what we had seen at the crash site. It turned, its multifaceted eyes catching the light, emitting an unsettling glow. Our training took over, each man falling into his respective role like clockwork. Sentinel was the first to react, his stern expression unchanging, showcasing years of combat experience. His rifle erupted into a thunderous roar, bullets spraying into the alien creature's center mass. Mayhem followed suit, though his actions were less calculated and more desperate. His body shook violently, his arm faltering. His rounds sporadically pelted the creature, adding to the cacophony of our assault. The black around his bandage seemed to be spreading rapidly, causing him to lose control. Shadow, usually calm and collected, was on edge, his eyes darting between Mayhem and the monstrosity. Nevertheless, he stayed focused, sending a hailstorm of bullets towards the creature. All the while, I fired my weapon, trying to ignore the tight knot of dread in my stomach. In the face of the nightmare before us, Mayhem, usually a rock, started to crumble. A tempest of gunfire erupted from his shotgun, punctuating the terror he was fighting within himself. Yet his broad shoulders quivered, his muscular arms shook. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, filled with a terror that I had never seen in him. With a cry that sent chills down my spine, he dropped his shotgun. His gloved hands flew to his head, gripping his helmet tightly. He fell to his knees and then started to crawl towards a darkened corner of the room, away from the hailstorm of gunfire and the advancing horror. Sentinel remained steady. His shots were deliberate, his aim true. I watched as he unloaded round after round into the creature. The echo of gunfire harsh in the confined space. With each thunderous report, the alien flinched, slowing but never stopping. I could see it now, that same oily substance dripping from its gargantuan claws, leaving a viscous trail on the linoleum. The sight triggered a surge of adrenaline, my heart hammering in my chest as I realized the implications. In a swift, blinding movement, the alien lashed out. Its claw caught Sentinel across his chest. The impact sent him spiraling backwards, his body colliding with a shelf, sending snacks scattering across the floor. He didn't get up. Shadow emptied his rifle into the beast, then he fell back to a safer position, his hands deftly reloading his weapon, his eyes never leaving the monstrosity. My attention was pulled away from my fallen commander as the creature turned its sights on me. It was quick, faster than its bulk suggested. The enormous claw swept towards me and I instinctively ducked, the sharp appendage whistling dangerously above my head. The claw connected with my rifle and ripped it from my grasp. I lost my balance and fell to the floor, the breath knocked out of me. I scrambled backwards, pulling my pistol from its holster. The alien lunged, the enormity of it blocking out the overhead lights. Its clawed hand snaked out, wrapping around my neck with a bone-chilling coldness. I choked, its grip crushing me. It lifted me, my feet dangling, kicking uselessly in the air. I managed to raise my pistol, pressing the muzzle against the underside of its alien jaw. I pulled the trigger, the recoil jumping through me. Once, twice, the entire magazine emptied into the creature. Its grip slackened. I dropped to the floor, gasping for breath as the alien toppled backwards. It crashed to the ground with a finality that echoed in the silence that followed. The silence rested over the room for a moment. Then, with a predatory swiftness, Shadow was on his feet, moving forwards, all the while firing into the alien's body, the spent shells from his rifle clattering on the hard floor. He closed the gap between him and the fallen alien. His magazine ran out, and without hesitation he drew his pistol and squeezed the trigger. The report of gunfire, a short, bitter staccato. He fired again and again. The alien's form still jerked from each bullet, each round a coup de grace. The magazine ran dry. Silence once again descended on the store. The store clerk was huddled in the corner, sobbing. Her body curled tightly, her face hidden in her hands. The occasional whimper bounced off the walls, filling the spaces where gunfire had just rained. The sound was heartbreaking, a poignant reminder of the terror that had just taken place, of the innocent lives that had just been destroyed. On shaky legs, I pushed myself upright. I retrieved my fallen rifle, the familiar weight reassuring in my hands. I ejected the empty magazine, replacing it with a full one. The metallic click as it locked into place seemed unnaturally loud in the aftermath. I stole a glance towards Mayhem, crumpled and now unmoving in the other corner. His hands were still wrapped around his head, his knuckles white. A feeling of dread washed over me as I noticed the inky blackness still spreading out from the bandage around his arm, the color vivid against his pale skin. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved over to Sentinel. He was sprawled awkwardly, his chest still, his face unnaturally pale under the harsh store lights. I reached out, searching for a pulse, but I found none. My hand fell away, a heavy weight settling in my stomach. Panic threatened to take hold, but I forced it back down. This was no time for emotional responses. "Shadow!" I barked, my voice echoing in the store. "Secure the site." Shadow was all efficiency, his movements precise. He moved over to the clerk, pulled out a pair of zip ties from his utility belt, and quickly secured her hands. His face was devoid of emotion, his focus solely on securing the site, making it safe. I drew out the radio, my hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins.
Oracle, this is Archer.
I spoke into the radio, my voice tight.
Sit rep. We've engaged the entity. Sentinel is KIA.
I could hear my own words echo in my head. Sentinel was gone. For a moment, there was only silence on the radio. The quiet punctuated by the harsh breathing of the store clerk and the eerie hum of the gas station's fluorescent lights. Then Oracle's voice crackled through, shock evident in his usually steady tone.
Acknowledged, Archer. Sentinel is... copy that.
I put the radio away and moved towards the gas station's counter. I paused and observed the scene, trying to decide what I should do. Oracle's voice on the radio interrupted my thoughts.
Backup is en route to your location, Archer. They're diverting from their current tasking. ETA is 5 minutes.
His voice was businesslike now, the initial shock replaced by the cool professionalism that had always characterized him. 5 minutes. We had to hold down the fort for 5 more minutes. With a heavy sigh, I nodded, even though Oracle couldn't see me.
Copy that, Oracle,
I said.
We'll hold until they get here.
The deafening sound of helicopter blades filled the air as the backup team descended onto the gas station. Within minutes, the parking lot transformed into a hub of organized chaos. Men and women in tactical gear swarmed the area, securing the site, tending to the wounded, and preserving the remains of the alien entity for further study. The team leader, a stern woman with a tight ponytail and ice-cold eyes, made her way towards me. "Archer," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. I briefed her quickly on the situation. From Mayhem's deteriorating condition to the horrors that we had found at the farm and the gas station. Nodding, she dispatched 2 of her team to accompany Shadow and me back to the crash site. With a last look at Mayhem, restrained and now being loaded onto a stretcher, I followed them into the waiting helicopter. As we rose above the scene, I watched the gas station recede until it was a mere dot on the landscape. But even from this height, I couldn't shake the sight of Sentinel's body, still and lifeless, covered by a tarp. Back at the crash site, we found Lifeline and Oracle, both in rough shape but alive. Oracle was nursing his wounds, wincing with every movement, but he was still functional. Lifeline was unconscious and looked bad. His injuries were severe. We secured the site and waited for the ground team. They arrived roughly 30 minutes later, taking over the site with a grim efficiency that felt almost mechanical. They were the cleanup crew, the erasers of evidence, the ones that would make sure that this night became nothing more than an accident in the eyes of the world. Finally, we were extracted. As the helicopter lifted off, I took one last look at the site. A smoky, charred reminder of the horrors that we had faced. Then, with a sigh, I turned my back on it, the quiet hum of the helicopter the only soundtrack to our retreat. In the soft, sterile light of the command center, I stood alone. The adrenaline of the operation had long since faded, replaced by a bone-deep fatigue and a somber quiet. Shadow had been patched up and released already, his typically vibrant eyes shadowed by the weight of the night's events. Oracle was in the infirmary, healing from his injuries. A few broken ribs and some nasty cuts, but he'd be fine. I'd seen him, and the spark of resilience in his gaze was a small comfort amid the uncertainty. I had yet to see Mayhem or Lifeline. The terse updates I had received were maddeningly vague. They were stable, and I'd be informed when there was more to share. I knew the bureaucracy of our organization well enough to know when to stop asking questions. Sentinel and Vault, they were another story. They were listed as KIA. Those 3 letters had a finality that echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the cost of our work. The ground team had done their job, scouring the site of the gas station, the farm, the car, ensuring that there was no trace of the otherworldly horror that we had faced. It was an accident, they had called it, to explain away the destruction and the death. The public had no idea of the true threat and the events that had happened. The witnesses, the innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, I had no idea what had happened to them. We had procedures for these sorts of things, but I couldn't shake the guilt. Their lives had been irrevocably altered because of us, because we had failed to keep them safe. I leaned against the cool glass of the command center's window, staring out at the night sky. In the quiet, I let myself question, for the first time in a long time, how much longer I could do this. On good days, when operations went smoothly, I could bury the doubts and focus on the mission. But after nights like this, the loss, the chaos, the creeping sense of doubt, it was hard. The weight of responsibility felt like a physical burden pulling me down. Sentinel, Vault, their faces flashed in my mind. Good soldiers, loyal friends, gone. But then a small voice in the back of my mind would remind me what we were fighting for, of the threats out there, bigger and more terrifying than anything ordinary people could comprehend. We were the line between them and chaos. If not us, then who? With a sigh, I pushed away from the window and turned back to the command center. We would mourn our losses, heal our wounds. We would learn from this and we'd keep fighting. Because that's what we do. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.